Bear Down Bears fans, Pat the Designer, Courtney Cronin in the building. The Chicago Bears podcast is here on a Tuesday. And listen, Justin Fields technically still hasn't been cleared, but he's been throwing the football. We've got Floose talk all over the place. That's what I'm dubbing it at this point, right? When you can see something, but he says it's not real, Floose talk. That's what I'm calling. Is that acceptable? We good with that?
Yeah, how was it explained to me the other day? Are you fluent in Floose speak, Floose talk, Floosology? There's a bunch of these terms floating around, and honestly, I think all of them are acceptable considering you go into these press conferences, you ask questions, and then the answers you get require a lot of reading between the lines and a lot of deciphering. So I would say that I am fluent in Floose talk.
Yeah, I mean, listen, like my favorite tweet of the year by far is Nick Moreno from CHGO tweeting out exactly what Matt Eberflus said. And as you read it, you're just like, what is this? What is, these are words that technically go together. It felt like, you ever seen that picture that like you can't identify one thing in the picture and it just makes your head start hurting? That's what it feels like reading those comments on paper. But hey, listen, they might be able to change the narrative on this team. There's 7 weeks left in the season. We'll talk about that. O-line movement could be coming. Let's hope so. It's at a certain point. And one of the biggest questions we need answered, all that more in today's episode of the Chicago Bears podcast. Hit that like button, subscribe to the page, leave a 5-star review. You know what to do. Courtney, let's jump into this because we've talked about Floose. We've talked about the Floose talk, and everyone's harping on what is Justin Fields going to do? What can Fields do to finish out the season? He's got to do this. I think we need to take a second and actually look at this coaching staff. You wrote a very excellent article about Montez Sweat and what the defense has going. Can Matt Eberflus change the narrative on his future with the Chicago Bears if this defense continues to make strides?
I think it's possible. I think anything's possible. So anybody who believes that his fate has already been written is wrong. Like, there's no declaration about next year at all right now from people I've spoken with inside Hallis Hall. And I know that vote of confidence that he got from Ryan Poles 2 or 3 weeks ago, the deadline, when he was talking about Montez Sweat, and that was the same day that David Walker got fired. And it was just like, all right, do you still believe that you have the right guy for the job? Because there's all of this other stuff that's going on amid all of the losing. And Poles, in the vote of confidence that he gave, sometimes called the dreaded vote of confidence, like, I'm not entirely sure what else he was supposed to say. And I've said this at every turn, that if he goes in there and starts dogging on the head coach or like undercutting him in any ways, then you've created another storyline for yourself. And look, this team has enough of those to go around without actually like perpetuating them by themselves. Like they can create they can have drama created ad nauseum this year. That's honestly how much it's happened. But I've been asked this a lot. I don't think that means anything just yet about, Matt Eberflus is safe for 2024. And I know that the Bears kept John Fox probably a year longer than most people would have liked after, going into that third season. And, the writing felt like it was on the wall. And then we know about Mark Trestman and how disastrous his tenure was here and how short the leash was for him to get fired after 2 seasons. So I don't see it. I don't see there's any one grandiose thing Matt Eberflus can do. The way it's been described to me is that the adapting and adjusting of the head coach is what the Bears want to see, continuing on this trend. Look, he guided that, like him or not, think he's a good coach or not, he kept this team on track when, there was a lot going on where you could get guys at a very early point of the season making business decisions and kind of mailing it in. I mean, when you go 0-4 to start the year, and then you have a short week in Washington, your wide receiver is MIA because the team told him to stay away. There's all this off-field chaos. The team showed fight. They won that game. That they clawed back to get their first win. And then you fast forward a couple of weeks with what happened against, the Saints. There was a 1-score game for them. There was a 1-score game, and it was a close game that the Bears felt like they were in control of in those moments. And if you're Ryan Poles, if you're George McCaskey, you're saying, okay, we see that this team is still fighting, that they haven't given up. Obviously that's going to have some effect or be an effect by the head coach in some form or fashion. But I think that this comes down to what are the Bears' goals with the roster in 2024, and do they feel like the coaching staff is capable of developing the players that they have in here currently, and also those that they might bring in. So you can't make a true evaluation on Matt Eberflus yet until you see what happens with Justin Fields these final 7 games. Frankly, I think a lot of these things go hand in hand because, and Luke Getsy, throw Luke Getsy into that mix too, because
100%.
he's not immune to this and he knows that. He the way he talks about kind of like the roller coaster that the season has been, and the ups and downs and the highs and lows, and seeing the improvements that they have made from last year to this point. Is he safe? Not by any stretch right now. I mean, I'm not saying like one way or the other. I'm just saying he has a lot to prove. It's not like, oh, it's a given he'll be the offensive coordinator next year.
Yeah.
We're talking about Matt Eberflus's job security. We're talking about the rest of his staff, offensive coordinator included. So that's what Ryan Poles has to look at here, the final 7 games, where it's not a situation that you have a 3-7 football team, playoffs are out of reach. All right, let's just mail it until we get to 2024. Much different than last year at this time, where they weren't expected to win. They're probably not going to be expected to win a lot of these games, but they definitely need to show that they're on the right track. Otherwise, you have to start over early in January next year.
Well, I think that's the interesting part too, right? I can look at Matt Eberflus's scenario and go, listen, the defense that he's trying to run, there is still a very key piece missing. Not having that 3 technique, not being able to get pressure with 4, basically is a death sentence to this defense. And guess what? For most of the season, we can look at the numbers, bend, break, whatever it is, and say, this defense, if the offense doesn't give up a turnover here, if you don't give up a pick 6 here, if you don't give up a fumble touchdown here, they're only giving up 21 to 24 points most of these weeks. Now, you got your butts kicked by the Chargers, but for the most part, you kind of look at the games and you go, I can see why Flus might be having issues with that. And he lost his DC to start the season. He wasn't supposed to be calling defense. I love the fact that you brought up Getsy, though, because on the offensive end, we came into this season saying, you have a wealth of riches. Yeah. What are you going to do with them? And we haven't seen that offense show that consistency. We've seen a couple of flash weeks. Of course, Justin Fields getting hurt really changes that. But that Vikings first half didn't leave us with anything to feel great about, right? And so I look at Luke Getsy's scenario and I'm like, could this actually be a Lovie Smith situation moving forward where, and I hope all of them are successful, but like where Flus is doing a good enough job where we'll keep you around, he has to be changed.
That's a good theory. It's one that I'm sure they're considering right now when you have to look at all the options. Because if you fire a head coach, you're probably taking his whole staff with him because the new head coach that comes in is going to bring his people. That's just how it is. So rarely do you get coaches that get retained. It's usually like 1 or 2. I've been a part of a few coach firings, and I've seen some coaches, get like 1 or 2, like a special teams coordinator get kept on. And then the coach brings in his entire offensive staff, his entire defensive staff. There's just like bottom line, there's very few holdovers. But like, I would think that if Matt Eberflus is gone after this season, that majority of his staff would be, barring what Justin Fields looks like these final 7 games of the season. And he's very much tied. His success is very much tied or Luke Getsy's success is very much tied to how Justin Fields does in the final 7 games. Because if this offense, and I'm not by any stretch delusional in thinking that it was perfect under Tyson Bagent. Like what did we really learn about the offense the last week against Carolina? Like they put up 16 points, they had 1 touchdown drive. The good thing is Tyson Bagent didn't turn the ball over. Positive after the team turned the ball over 5 times against the Saints, him being responsible for 4 of those. But outside of a couple throws, the one that sealed the game against, to Mooney in the 4th quarter and the waning moments, like outside of that, this guy was struggling. Like he was struggling throughout this game. But there are positives that you can take away from how the offense looked those 4 games that you saw Tyson Bagent start, and then seeing what it looks like. Does it regress with Justin Fields, or does it like actually go up the other direction? And they start building upon the last couple of weeks, building on the pass protection. You mentioned, maybe Nate Davis comes back. What does that do to the offensive line combination? That's on the offensive coordinator too, to figure out, they're always talking about the best 5 up. We got to get the best 5 up there up front. Well, how do you make that work when you now have a surplus of offensive linemen and who ends up going to the bench because of it? Like, that's an offensive coordinator decision as much as it is people, who control game day actives and inactives, personnel people. So I honestly look at Getsy, this might be like the biggest storyline of all of this. Like, because what does his offense look like? Because you can find in these final 7 games, is it the offense's issue or is it the quarterback's issue? Because we saw that with 4 games. Hey, Luke Getsy looked more creative with his play calling. You had a quarterback who was willing to stay on script, to not try to make plays there were times absolutely he was forcing it, but not, in the way that we've seen Justin Fields scramble, and sometimes those are unsuccessful, but sometimes those can also break off a 50-yard gain.
Right.
Like, you had a quarterback who was not taking nearly as many sacks, who was able to get the ball out quickly. It just led to a 2-2 record in that time frame. Can you see Getsy pick up with that and ask Justin Fields to do similar things, build, do the things that he wasn't doing with Justin Fields now that Fields is back in, the things that really only Fields is capable of doing, a lot of those broken plays and extending drives. And that's going to be a reflection on what Luke Getsy now asks Fields to do, knowing that we probably will see at least a game or 2 of rust because he hasn't played since October 15th.
Yeah, and it sucks because, right, he comes back versus one of the highest powered offenses in the NFL. Mm-hmm. 2 weeks, basically, right? It's Lions, Vikings, Lions again. So you don't even get a break in there pretty much. But I think that you mentioned something very interesting, right? The sack numbers. This offensive line all of a sudden looked better, and the offensive line combination I think it's probably one of the best we've seen with Tevin Jenkins and Darnell Wright on that right side.
Yeah, I agree with that.
I love what we've seen there, but there is an aspect of it that does go to the quarterback just saying, set hut, I know where my read is. That's not there. I'm on to this one. Make the throw. We've seen Justin Fields be the guy who will hold on to the football a lot. Mm-hmm. I think that will be a serious question if all of a sudden he comes back and this offensive line just looks like it's falling off a cliff, right? Like the how quickly Tyson Bagent was willing to get the football out is something that I do think, right, when we kept hearing on was it Thursday Night Football that they want Justin Fields to watch this and see some of the things, and I think that was
the Sunday night game against the Chargers.
Sunday night
the whole
game,
idea that Fields could learn. So I didn't take anything from that comment. They were at that point a 2-win football team.
Yeah.
You're a bad team and you have young players. Young players can learn from others around them. Justin's not immune to that. And I don't even think he would tell you that. Of course, that comes across because of the production meetings and everything else. The staff is trying to throw Fields under the bus. That is what some delusional Bears fans think. That's not how it was meant. I can tell you, I know that is not how it was meant. And it's just frustrating that that became such a big storyline out of nothing, where you could tell the divide between people who really want Justin Fields to succeed almost at the cost of their own team doing well, which I think is just a bad way to be a fan. And I'm not a fan. So I'm not going to tell somebody how to fan, but come on, grow up. And I think that when in these meetings and over the course of the last couple of weeks, when Fields has not been able to play, there definitely have been times where I'm sure he's okay, look at how Tyson's operating in this situation. Are there things I can do differently? He's a self-aware person. He's probably the most self-aware person in that locker room. And I don't think that there's anything negative with asking your quarterbacks to see what somebody did and then learn from it, whether it's the starter or whether it's the Division II backup.
I would be irritated if my quarterback felt that he was too good to take that piece from a guy, right? Listen,
it was Tom Brady or Aaron Rodgers. Jesus Christ. Can we not act like Justin Fields has been anointed and he has no flaws in his game, none of this shit. And that's just what drives me nuts about it, because there's a section of people that heard that comment. And I know we're kind of going on a tangent here because that was 2 weeks ago.
That's all right. It's a podcast.
People heard that comment and they went nuts for no reason, Pat. They were saying oh, that's a slight on Justin Fields. No, it's not. That's common sense. And when I had a chance to talk with Andrew Janocko about this last week, the quarterback's coach just met with a couple of us last Tuesday and asked him how he took that comment. it can be as simple as everybody's watching a game in the hotel room before a game and they see a quarterback, they see an arm angle, and everybody's eyes are turning to, what's going on the TV. Like, it's literally just stacking information, and it's not an indictment on anyone. Justin Fields has been a starter here for 3 years. Very clearly, he's done something right to have that job. I don't see what people are so up in arms about, like the idea that, oh, maybe there are some things he can see when he's not a part of this offense because of injury. He can see how it operates. And then when he comes back, oh, these things worked. Maybe I can implement them in part of what I do to lead this offense. Like, that's not controversial. I think people you must be bored. They're making shit up for no reason on that.
Yeah, I got Courtney blood hot out here, man. That's how we get it done.
Stupid. Like, I mean, it's honestly delusional. Like, you don't have a single Hall of Famer on this roster.
Well, and even Hall of Famers do that. Brett Favre had no idea what nickel was until he asked his backup quarterback.
Yeah, nobody's immune to learning. Like, the second you stop learning, the second you stop growing. So, just move on to the next thing, because that's just so dumb to me that people got that frustrated about it. And I'll be curious when we actually get to talk to Justin again, because we've only talked to him once since the injury. Yeah. What did you learn these last 4 weeks? I mean, I'm sure he's been chomping at the bit to get back out there. He's a competitor. We know these things, but what did he learn about the way the offense operated when you saw a lot of RPOs against the New Orleans Saints, where you saw like an influx of play action to get Tyson Bagent on the move? Even when you saw Tyson Bagent discover that he had a set of wheels, like, what did you learn about this offense that when you come back in, and no one has ever said anything to the contrary other than Justin is our starter, he's playing when he's back and when he's healthy, what do you think you can build upon now that, like, they, carried the baton the last 4 weeks to let you get healthy?
It was definitely a media-created quarterback controversy, and my favorite thing was every time you saw Tyson and Justin together, Justin was like the happiest for this guy, or like Tyson had a bad game versus Saints, Justin's right there with him. Like, it was one of those where, like, this was a narrative that definitely was not inside the building. That was definitely outside the building. Now, does that mean that it couldn't have become a narrative if Tyson goes out there and he laces 300 yards a game and 2 touchdowns, 1 interception? Sure, then it's a narrative. But it was definitely one where, like, there's somebody else under center. Uh-oh. And what I love, and right, even that conversation on can he learn something from Tyson? I would hope so, because I want Tyson to be his backup. I like the transition from Tyson to Justin to Tyson, because they can do a lot of things, especially in that Saints game, right? Very similar if they need to. Tyson showed he can get out of trouble. So I actually like moving forward. If this is the combination that sticks around, I think the Bears would have one of those Lamar Jackson to Snoop Huntley type of situations where is it a win-win situation? Well, no, our starter's not in there, but he can run a lot of the same things. It doesn't disrupt.
You know how hard it is to find a good backup quarterback? Like, it is really hard. Take a look at, the Dallas Cowboys with Cooper Rush and being able, like, that was like lightning in a bottle that they caught when Dak went down with a thumb injury last season or 2 seasons ago. And so often, do the Bears want to ever go back to the situation that they had when Fields couldn't play last year against the Jets, and it was Trevor Siemian getting hurt in warm-ups and it's Nathan Peterman just struggling to stay alive out there? No, you want to have a capable backup. And throughout all of this, I think that's one thing that they found, like, that they don't need to go searching every year for a different backup. That you have somebody who was a developmental quarterback to begin with, and he's played 4.5 games for you. Like, that's, out of a bad situation came something pretty decent for the Bears, that they can at least carry that. No matter what happens at quarterback elsewhere, they can at least carry that going into 2024.
100%. Let's keep it moving along here. Hard Rock Casino is the sponsor for this show in Northern Indiana. You can see Blue October on November 30th at Hard Rock Live. Tickets on sale now at Ticketmaster.com. Now, here's a real question, right? We talked a little bit about some of the things we saw while Bagent was under center, and can this Bears team continue to change the narrative with this offense? We talked a little bit about it feels like they got the right offensive line combination, but Nate Davis might be back. I love Tevin Jenkins on the right side. I loved it last season, but they wanted to go out and get a right guard so that Tevin can move back to left guard, gives you a little bit more stability. I understand the logic there. Do you move around what's already working? to bring Nate Davis back in the spot where he is most comfortable. I think he's only had one season playing left guard, and it was sparingly.
It's tough. And like, I know what Matt Eberflus said on Monday, that everybody can play a multitude of positions. Like, they cross-train guys at multiple positions for this very reason, but it's like it's twofold, because the guy's been out since the Minnesota game. So he last played October 15th as well. So it's been a month. Do you put him back where he's most comfortable at right guard, or do you say kind of like, tough shit a little bit? Like, Tevin's been playing great at this position. We don't want to keep moving guys around. Like, why move 2 spots instead of just 1? Right. We're going to put you at left guard. And, if he scoffs at it, if he doesn't like the idea, frankly, too bad, because, the offense, this has been such a problem unit for this team that they have been trying to figure out. And honestly, the last couple of games, when they put Cody Whitehair back at left guard, they put Lucas Patrick back at center, and they moved Tevin Jenkins over to right. Like, it's definitely been the unit's been better. The right side of the offensive line has been really darn good. Look at where some of those runs from D'Onta Foreman have gone when he's running to the right side of the line and when they're doing outside zone stuff. But I think for Nate Davis, like, God, like, I wouldn't want to be making this decision because it's a hard one. I've heard Tevin Jenkins say that going from left to right is easier for him than going from right to left. Yeah. Okay, knowing that, do you then say, okay, well, this is probably what's best for him right now, Nate Davis, we're going to try you at left guard. What if he's terrible at left guard? What if he is struggling to get acclimated? He hasn't played in a month, so there's clearly going to be rust there. Do you platoon in with Cody Whitehair? Like, all of these things like keep coming into play. Like, also, what do you do with Cody Whitehair? You going to put him back at center? You're going to have him and Lucas? No,
no, he doesn't play. I'm sorry. It's okay. I'm fine with that. I love Cody. You've been a great Bear.
And you have a really good situation, and you have a great backup at that point. Like, it's the best case scenario if that ends up being the case. But I really have a hard time believing it's fair, number one, and life's not fair. We know that. But like, the more you can do, honestly, the more penalized you get by like, okay, there's going to like move things around. I'm going to be the first guy to have to move over if that is Tevin Jenkins. But I'll be that's probably like Justin coming back this week, more than likely seems like the biggest story. It is the biggest storyline, but more than likely he comes back. I feel like Eberflus hinted at that last week when he said that he probably would have been in a better position to play had that game been on Sunday. But now that he's got 10 days, the 10 days in between games, like, that's the biggest storyline. But then it's the offensive line, and if Nate Davis can come back. I mean, we just heard he started running. Like, that's what Eberflus said when I asked him about it last week. So does he need another week? Does it end up happening this week? What do you do with your running backs? Because like, when I was watching D'Onta Foreman when I was leaving the locker room, it wasn't just like a noticeable limp. It was like he couldn't walk. Like, he was pretty messed up after that game. And I felt, he did an awesome job again, because we've had that conversation come up. Okay, when Khalil Herbert's able to come back, what does that do to D'Onta Foreman? In no way, shape, or form should D'Onta Foreman be inactive, but he was on a bike yesterday at practice, and hopefully whatever he did in that, remember he went to the medical tent and there was no injury designation for him, and he came back out and he played. He was limping, like noticeable, like what's the word I'm looking for here? Like, he was like, physically you could tell, okay, that's not just a limp. That's someone who's in pretty significant pain right now. Yeah. So hopefully for his sake, he doesn't have to, it gets better by the time that they play on Sunday. But again, like, these are all like big picture things that end up affecting what goes on this weekend against Detroit.
Yeah. It's the running back situation is probably the most interesting and the one you feel the worst about, right? Because I mean, at the end of the day, it is an interchangeable position based on the guys you put in front of them, right? Like the offensive line, if Khalil Herbert comes back and he's able to go this week and he runs hard, guess what? He's the flavor of the month this month, right? Like that's kind of how the running back position goes in the modern NFL. But on the offensive line, you don't have that luxury, right? And to me, you have to ask yourself, would you rather be great at something or be good at a couple of things? Because I mean, not to say that Cody Whitehair is winning any awards here, but he's been good at left guard. He's been, well, good's tough. He's been serviceable at left guard. On the right side, you've been great over the last 2 weeks.
Yeah. No,
Over the last, well, when
you're
did they
right.
make the switch there? When they make the switch? That was 3 weeks ago, right? Where they put Tevin on the right side, I believe.
It was after, so like it was one
After
after
Vegas, I think, right?
Washington was week 5, and then Minnesota was week 6. That's when they had the
That's when
switch.
Nate got hurt.
That's when Nate Davis got, yeah, it was week 6 because that's when Patrick or Lucas Patrick went in because Cody Whitehair got benched in the third quarter. So yeah, week 7. Week 7 is when they made that switch.
So you're talking about now, I mean, like, that would be 3 weeks of seeing something elite. I mean, like, when you see them run on the right side, I'm terrified. I feel bad for defenders because both Tevin and Darnell can run, and they both have no problems just like pancake block. Here it comes. You're about to die. So, like, it's one of those, like, would you rather be just good there? Because Nate Davis isn't going to give you that. Like, he's fine in pass blocking. He's actually pretty good in pass blocking. I'll give him that on the right side. But in the run blocking game, he's not going to give you what Tevin gives you there. That's a tough scenario to be in. And right then, all of a sudden, to just go, all right, Nate, well, now you're going to be the left guard because we paid you. So you're going to be out here. The one thing I guarantee, he's going to play when he's ready to go.
He's healthy, yeah.
I mean, so we paid you, so you're going to be on the left side. I think there's like 2019, he played left guard for 3 games.
It's the reason that they made the switch initially when they signed him as a free agent, like almost like within like a couple minutes of them signing him, they called Tevin Jenkins and said, you're moving to the left side of the offensive line. And you know, it's a good position if you're somebody who can, it's a good position to be in if you're somebody who can be that versatile, because that helps with job security. And remember, Tevin Jenkins now is he'll be up for a contract at some point soon, so this only increases his value. And we were talking about this the other night on Sports Zone, like the guys that you pay, like I know we're talking about Jalen Johnson, and I know Mooney's name gets in the mix, but somebody that you should be able to extend soon will be Tevin Jenkins going into year 4 for him in 2024. Like, he should absolutely be, I mean, he's a success story for this team, considering he was a left tackle and he gets moved around and you finally find the fit. And you know this guy is so versatile, you can play him at both guard spots. So I really think that they need to make sure that they're making the right move here. And if somebody has been comfortable for a couple of weeks, you run the risk of throwing that continuity off up front. So I would 100%. Say if Nate Davis is like amenable to moving, and even if he's not, like, you still have to kind of be like, all right, this is what's best for the football team, and the players have to understand that too. So when you get a chance to see during practice this week where do guys look like they're, like, during individual, where does it look like they're lining up, that will tell us a lot of what we think this offensive line combination would be like. But I really wouldn't be surprised to get Nate Davis up to speed if they keep Tevin Jenkins at right guard. If there's a platoon between Cody Whitehair and Nate Davis until Nate Davis is ready to play, that's the way that they've been handling offensive line injuries and people easing themselves back in. We saw it with Larry Borum and Braxton Jones recently. Yeah.
It's so interesting too, because the conversation on paying Tevin is one that I think most Bears fans wouldn't have been thinking we were coming into this season because of the injury history, right? First year, plays 6 games. Year 2, misses 4 games. 4 games, I mean,
surgeries,
for an offensive lineman.
Stuff that happened this offseason.
Yeah, everything that happened this offseason. But he's so talented. He's such a talent on the offensive line that I don't think the Chicago Bears can actually afford to lose him in this offseason.
Especially when they're going to be like, they're going to have to go find a center in free agency. And and who knows what happens here with, like, Nate Davis going forward. And, like, it obviously, for a lot of different reasons, hasn't worked out the way they expected it to this year. But, like, eventually there will be outs in that contract. Like, how do they want to play this? Like, certainly center is one of the biggest positions of need going forward, if that's free agency, if that's the draft. But then do you use a draft pick to go get more guard depth, actual guard depth that you feel like can develop into starting players? Like, it's never a bad thing to be prepared, considering this is a team that thought, okay, for once, we're not going to have all of the issues with continuity along the offensive line that we have had. And then it just ended up all falling apart right before the regular season started. I think they've learned a lot about that and just, like, how that's going to affect their roster construction strategy going forward.
Well, I think even the thing that stands out for the Bears, even with all of the injuries, is you had Larry Borum be able to step in, and he was serviceable at left tackle for a couple of weeks. He wasn't great, but he was serviceable. You had Cody Whitehair be able to, and that wasn't good at all, but slide over to center while Lucas Patrick was out, right? Like, you have those pieces where it never felt like, okay, the offensive line is hopeless this year. We've got this guy that can slide in and slide in. I wouldn't be surprised to see them attack that in free agency. I think that's something you still need to attack in the draft. I know this isn't a center heavy draft at all, but like in that first round, to me, I'm still looking at left tackle. I love Braxton. I want to see him do well. I hope he continues to develop. We're having the same conversation on Braxton we had last year, minus the injury. Like, the injury wasn't a part of the conversation, but he's still getting pushed back. It's the same. It's better. And maybe that's what you're waiting on. Maybe Braxton has a year 3 and you're fine with it. But I think there's a Joe Alt there that can be plug and play, ready to go. Very much like Darnell Wright is. And I'd be looking at him in the first round. And I think you got to address center later on in the draft and kind of find that Braxton Jones piece that, is able to go out there and be a long-term center for you. So
yeah, you won't find a lot of teams though willing to spend. I mean, I covered the Vikings when they drafted Garrett Bradbury in the top 20 in 2019. Teams don't typically spend high draft capital on the center position. It doesn't mean you can't, but again, the 2 top 5 draft picks currently right now, the way the season pans out will show you, okay, is one of those top 5 draft picks going to be a quarterback? If they decide that the quarterbacks is already on the roster, then you are in a great position to use one of those draft picks to then trade back to then go get your offensive lineman, maybe your left tackle of the future in the first or second round, and then still be able to get another wide receiver, whether it's Marvin Harrison Jr., whether it's somebody else. Yeah. You can do a lot of those things. And I just, anybody who says that these next 7 games don't matter, it's all about draft positioning. It's about draft positioning, but it's also about figuring out, all right, which of these players who are current starters are not going to be starters next year, and then that dictates what you do in March.
The most important draft position you have to worry about is the Panthers. Like, that's the only one. Like, I think if the Bears rattle off 3 wins out of their next 7, and it's, Justin Fields is looking like the quarterback of the future, and like the team just wasn't coached well enough, or there wasn't enough talent on the defensive end for you to come out away with. That's your best case scenario here, right? And you end up with a 12th pick instead of a top 5 pick for the Bears pick. Oh my goodness, what are we going to do? Well, Carolina doesn't have a lot of wins coming on their schedule. Like, I would be very surprised by that. And then, to me, you're talking about one of the best fleeces of a team you've seen in ages. They got Bryce Young, gave you DJ Moore when they were begging for a number 1 wide receiver 4 games into the season. You got Darnell Wright out of it. You might get, I don't know, MHJ or Caleb Williams, I guess, if it works out that way, where the quarterback doesn't work. Tyreek Stevenson is in there, and a 2025 set. That's one of the best fleeces I've seen in a long time, probably since Mitch. Probably since we traded all that capital for Mitch.
And I've been hesitant to say like, okay, well, he's won that. Ryan Poles has won that trade completely. But like, we're at the halfway point of the season. Bryce Young very well at one point, not this year, but at one point in his career, he can develop into a great quarterback. Oh, they thought he would have been further along by now. I think that's pretty obvious. But the way that this thing is panning out is showing you, okay, the Bears look like winners right now. I wish they would utilize DJ Moore more. But I think you can really then put the final grade on it when you see what Ryan Poles does with that number 1 overall pick. Does he flip it into more draft capital? Does he go get his quarterback? To me, it's not a complete grade until you see what he does there. But the haul itself, for what it's panning out to be at the moment, remember, they have that 2025 second-round pick, too. So everybody who's, like, complaining about them giving up a second-round pick for Montez Sweat, remember, they have an additional one the following draft.
Yeah. No, it's I can't, in good faith, defend Justin for a lot of things and then watch that all 22 and not defend Bryce. They're setting him up to die. That offensive system is just like, I thought I had issues with how Getsy called plays at times. My God, Frank Wright. Like, what happened? Like,
and it's Thomas Brown now. I mean, they made the switch for play caller.
Yeah.
He's their OC. And I don't know what their identity is. It was really hard to figure out during the game what they were trying to do offensively, because And that's like where I think you have to like when bringing it back to the Bears.
Yeah.
Like what growth did they have against like I know it was a 16-13 win. They didn't show you much offensively. Defensively, it looks like they took a step in the right direction.
But the Panthers' offensive line is abysmal.
And like, okay, you're now about to face an offensive line that like kept Joey Bosa and Khalil Mack at bay. So like, good luck. But also, are there things that you can carry over to show, hey, we are growing? Matt Eberflus, I am coaching the right way. My scheme is working. Or is it just going to go back to the way it looked in that 2 streaks where they didn't have any sacks and could barely get around the quarterback? And is it going to go back to the byproduct of, the reason that happened for you against Washington, the reason that happened for you against the Panthers is because you were playing bad teams, bad offenses?
No, yeah, 100%. Listen, we're going to get all the answers we need real quick here over this next 4 weeks of football. And there's going to be some rust on Justin Fields for sure not being out there, but like, if the offense just goes back to looking pedestrian at best, if Luke Getsy, like if we're not running the football, if we're not like there's going to be a lot of answers that happen over this. Now, I guess technically 5 weeks because the bye is in there over this next 5 weeks of football, because you're going up against the toughest part of your schedule right now. And I guess, for most teams, you would feel good about getting all of your starters back for this portion of the schedule. But for the Bears, you never know. Any nuggets that we haven't hit on, Courtney, that you want to leave us with before we get up out of here?
The Khalil Herbert one is going to be one to watch. Like, they still have to create a roster spot to get him onto the 53. When does that happen? Who is it?
Yeah.
And you hope that Deontay Foreman is healthy enough to play. If he's not, then you give him a week of rest. But I'm a firm believer that he's done enough to prove he deserves to be a game day active and also have a pretty significant role in this running game, regardless of like how many backs that they have up. I mean, obviously that stuff matters, but he's done too much to say, okay, well, thanks for the 4 weeks of service. We're going back to Herbert and Roschon Johnson. Like, I hope they continue to find ways to utilize Deontay Foreman, because when you take a look at that Detroit backfield, 3 players, including Amon-Ra St. Brown, who's a wide receiver, but 3 players going over 100 yards from scrimmage each, whether it was David Montgomery, Jahmyr Gibbs, then St. Brown. Like, there's ways to do that, I think, if you're the Bears, to have a versatile, dimensional backfield. So hopefully the health of Deontay Foreman will allow you to do that this week, and then also just kind of keeping an eye on where and when Khalil Herbert gets onto the roster.
Yeah, is this the Valus cut finally coming down? He's been made inactive.
Today would be the day I think they would do it. I really do, because of game checks that are due for players for the following week. But I don't know. This one will continue to stump me at this point, because I just don't see how you can continue. I mean, he was inactive last week. You're paying for what on your roster at that point?
Yeah. That's pretty much what I've been saying all season. You're paying for what on the roster? But hey, it's been the Chicago Bears podcast. We will keep you guys up to date on anything. If any breaking news comes out, you'll see this glorious face on that as well. Appreciate you guys for tuning in and showing love. Hit that like button, subscribe to the page. As always, for Courtney Cronin, it's your boy Pat the Designer, back at it again. Gotta stay safe out there, Chicago. Bear down. Peace.